Hi, welcome to Digital Dialogs, your compact conversations on the future of technology. My name is Rene from Reply, and today we're going to talk about effective computing in humanoid robotics and healthcare, and also mixed reality, I think. And I'm very honored to have a special expert guest today, Walter Greenleaf. Hi, Walter. How are you today?
I'm good, Renee. I'm excited to be here. This will be a fun conversation.
I'm sure it will be. Before we get started with the actual topic, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience and tell your background as it relates to neuroscience, education, and what have you?
Absolutely. I've got a diverse background. I'm a scientist, a neuroscientist by training and predilection. I'm also a technologist with a focus on several aspects of technology. I've been working in virtual reality and augmented reality technology for since the mid 1980s. So one of the early pioneers in that zone. I'm also a psychophysiologist, meaning I love to measure signals from the human body and interpret them. And I'm also a medical product developer. I've had the opportunity to start in several medical product companies and bring several clinical products to market.
Wow. Well, that's an impressive background. And in particular, my background is also strongly in AR and VR. Also, I mean, like not as long, not in the 80s, but surely it's impressive what was already done back then. I recently, like in August, no, in August I attended SIGGRAPH in Denver, and there was also a lot of goodies from Pixar and also the old days shown, and yeah, really fascinating what was already accomplished back in the days.
You're absolutely right. And although we have much better resolution to our systems now and better ways of generating the graphical content, at least in the medical zone, we have been able to use VR for clinical impact now for decades. Of course, the equipment was very expensive back then and to a large extent very uncomfortable to wear. So we couldn't really scale it beyond just our research labs. I'm based at Stanford University, and
Yeah,
we had trouble taking it beyond the academic centers. But now, with the cost of VR and AR systems being less expensive and being much more comfortable to use, so we're seeing it being rolled out really worldwide as for several applications in the clinical area.
got it. And so let's talk about some of that, but also I would like to chime in a bit of humanoid robotics, and we can also think about like remote controlling those, like teleoperation with VR headsets. So, but I'm also interested on with your psychology background, also on the affective computing stack and having a more empathetic conversations with the in the end it's a human machine interface, right? Having a more empathetic conversations there. So, what do you think? How can effective computing transform these interactions between robotic systems, or we can also say any technology system, and humans, right? And you might also be aware of some implementations that you could talk about.
Sure. Well, I'm excited about the progress we're making in affective computing for three reasons. Uh, I guess at the top of my list is the fact that now, with the ability to use voice tones, facial expressions, body language as part of an interpretation of someone's mental state and emotional state, and to some extent cognitive state, we now finally have a way to do objective measurements at what previously, at least in the field of psychiatry and psychology, was very subjective, asking someone to remember how they felt
Yeah,
yesterday or how that medication they're taking helped them with their mood. It's hard to describe that, and it's hard to recall that, and it's hard to report it honestly. So, being able to measure objectively the emotional state in others is so important for clinical care. It's also very important for research. In order, if we're going to design new ways to help people with mental health issues, we need to have better measurements other than subjective reports. And finally, I think as with an aging population, we're going to have so many of our seniors are at risk of developing um, mental health issues as they age, and also physical issues, problems with mobility, etc. We're going to need to leverage technology to help. Family sizes have gone down. People are living so much longer. In order to address this gap and to support an aging population where there's a higher percentage of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and
Mhm.
other very serious issues. We need to leverage technology, and part of that, in order to have our interfaces with technology understand us better and respond appropriately, we need to pioneer new ways in effective computing, and we're making great progress.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that's also like you're saying, also with an aging population and a shortage of skilled workers. I mean, humanoid robots will definitely fill in quite some gaps here, I think. Especially if you look at all the progress that happens recently. Um, and I think, like you're saying, like the effective computing and having more an empathetic connection between a robot and a human is much needed. Like also, like if we think about the aging population, like elderly care, right, and in general, care is a topic. Like I know here in Germany, like it's a big issue that there's not enough workers in that field, in elderly care or patient care in general. Um, and so that might also be a way to fill that gap, and but having that with a more empathetic way of doing it. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, absolutely, and I think also, there's people who are challenged by being able to recognize the emotional state in others. Uh, Many people on the autism spectrum
Yes.
have that challenge. However, we can use the techniques of effective computing to provide them with feedback, um, and
Yeah.
they can learn to recognize with that feedback the emotional states in others, or maybe have that provided to them through a display system like a AR system. I think it's also just useful in general. If I'd like to learn to be a more empathetic person, I need to be able to be better at understanding the emotional states in others, and also
Mhm.
maybe perhaps getting better at conveying my own emotional state. So again, the key, not just in clinical care and health and wellness, but also to help us build our skills. We need to have better measurement systems and better ways to provide that information to our robotic assistants and to our AI systems so that they can better serve us. I anticipate that in the future, our buildings, our automobiles, our refrigerators, the communication systems we use are going to try and adapt themselves to understand our goals and our emotional states. So if we didn't get enough sleep the night before, we're having a bad day, or maybe we're having a great day, our technology should understand us and adapt itself to us. But in order to do that, we need to apply the principles of effective computing.
Yeah, makes total sense. And since you're also, of course, being part of the Visual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford, and like you also mentioned, having a long standing experience with VR and AR, um, how do you think the intersection of neuroscience and then these advanced interfaces like VR and AR and also robotics? Let's talk about this. So how does the emotional intelligence play a role, also in designing these 3D environments? Like especially if we have, like you also mentioned autism and certain um, you know p- like I would say like conditions, psychological conditions, right? Like how can you use this technology also, and what do you think about keeping these um, systems or these 3D worlds, these 3D environments in such a way that there's also emotional intelligence in it?
It's a really good question. I think that one of the challenges that we've had as we develop virtual world technology and spend more time right now. Our interaction through video conferencing is very flat. We're mostly talking heads. But with virtual world technology, we can meet and have meetings in a more naturalistic, realistic environment. And that'll help address isolation and loneliness, of course, but also make us more productive. But in order to do that, we have to appreciate that there's a diversity of culture, there's a diversity of ethnographic background and age differences in our experiences, and the environments that we are creating need to be diverse and adaptive to us. So, in order to do that, we need to understand, have the ability to understand each other better, and to
Yeah.
also provide us with ways of maybe filtering. In addition to being able to measure our emotional state and provide systems to adapt for that, we should be able to um, dynamically change the context that we're in based on our mood, and that I think will be a really wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. I'm glad you're mentioning mood, because that is, I think, a bigger challenge that I at least I think it's a big challenge to actually get the mood in it, right? So we have your current emotional state, which we can sense with certain sensors like camera technology to figure out your mimics. Then obviously large language models to figure out what you're saying in a sense of, you know, is it like a negative or positive, like the kind of sentiment analysis. And then obviously also from the audio itself, like how you are saying it, tonality and so on, right? But then we can sense the current emotional state, right? But you're saying the mood is like, I like in the morning something bad might have happened, so my whole day is kind of ruined and I'm not in a great mood. But right now in a conversation I might put up a smiley face and just go with it. But under it, we as humans often can sense that there's something ongoing with the mood of a person, right? And I think that's not so easy to detect with the current state of systems we have. So what are your thoughts on that actually?
Well, let me pose a question to you. If I'm a creator and I'm creating an experience for you, maybe it's a, podcast, or maybe I'm a director of a movie, and I'm able to
Uh-huh.
sense your mood dynamically. Perhaps I could have the in that story, just like in our gaming environment right now. They pay attention to our games, pay attention to our behavior, and maybe level up things based on our progress and also our choices. I think we could see entertainment become more of a dynamic narrative also. So the end of an experience might be based upon what you are enjoying and not. So watching something in a movie theater, or perhaps in on a laptop, perhaps the stories will change based on your preferences as picked up by your emotional reaction to the story. So that in a way, I think will change entertainment, because right now often we're sort of passive. We go along for
Yeah,
the ride on the story and don't have any agency as to how it concludes. But with sensing, we can maybe fold that in if we'd like. It'd be an interesting issue.
for sure. I think, like you're saying, like for the whole entertainment industry, there's so much untapped potential for, like, and also in the age we're now living in, the age of, well, uh, intelligent AI or whatever you want to call it. Although AI is, I don't like that term too much. Like, what is artificial in the end anyway? I think it's rather machine intelligence, but that's a different conversation. But surely that is the age of large language models and all of that. That is all coming together that will enable these kind of things. Also dynamically actually creating movies, like you're saying, not just sensing, but also then dynamically adapting the content, but actually also creating it on the fly. And we see all these progress with this Gen AI video creation models and so on. It's highly impressive, but it's also concerning, of course, when we think about the implications all of this has. And I think that also is an aspect when we think about affective computings, like the whole societal aspect. Also, when we think about privacy and making sure that highly personal private information is secured and so on. But maybe we can talk about some of the challenges. I mean, there's technology or technical challenges, but also some societal challenges when we think about integrating effective computing. So let's talk about what are the challenges, but also the opportunities in integrating effective computing, and what advancements do you see in the future?
Well, that is the balance. There's a long list of challenges, but there's also some acute needs, especially when it comes to mental health. We're having
Hmm.
some crises in that zone right now, especially in our youth, and also with
Okay.
our seniors. Um, and in general, life is a challenge, and it's been getting in some zones even more so. So we do need to come up with better solutions in the field of mental health, psychiatry, and psychology. The big challenge, though, of as we move forward to leverage affective computing to do more objective measurements of emotional state, is that this is very personal data that could be used by employers to discern if an employee is disgruntled or is perhaps depressed, and maybe fire them based on those measurements
Yeah.
if they and is that appropriate? If we're doing predictive modeling, then you know the tech companies will have information about us, and there's a lot already out there in public domain that they can use to sell us things and personalize their pitches to us in a more impactful way to get us to buy more stuff. Do we want that? And then, of course, in uh, in countries where there's um, a desire to be able to identify dissidents and perhaps root them out, then being able to identify people who are discontent by just their public information of how they're moving and how they're walking and their facial expressions and their voice tones could become very problematic. So, and I don't want to have to wear camouflage to obscure my emotional state
Okay.
from video cameras and change my voice in order to confuse the authorities. So it's a delicate issue. I'm excited about the way we're going to have new ways to help with people who are struggling with anxiety, depression, and other serious mental illnesses. But I am concerned about the privacy issue and the impact on people who are, neurodiverse and also maybe perhaps aren't going along with the program. So, how do we handle freedom versus acute need of moving forward these technologies?
Yeah. It's exactly like you're saying. It's this kind of balancing act between freedom and providing opportunities and help. Um, and I mean that's a general thing that always applies for everything, right? It's like saying kitchen equipment could also be used as weapons and so on, right? It's that the long going discussion we always have. But surely we need some regulation. I think it's part of the guardrails we have as a society, I think. But the big challenge is, what are the guardrails, right? The guardrails like that OpenAI, for example, with GPT models, or Google with Gemini, or Meta with their auto models and so on. What these companies build into their models, like guardrails, have a certain how would I say? Well, you might call it censoring, right? They don't allow you to ask certain things or provide you a certain bias, and that is already in itself challenging, because it's also different cultures play a big role, right? Like if I go to a certain country, they have a different culture there, so things that are culturally appropriate here might not be appropriate there. And so what can I do to make this happen? So I think actually when we're talking about the progress of large language models or AI in general, the uh, the biggest challenge is actually that alignment problem, and the alignment problem on a global scale. I don't know how to solve it, honestly. I'm thinking about it often, actually, because like regulation is good to a certain degree, but we also need to be careful that we're not over regulating. And especially here in Europe with the AI Act, there are certain things that are already a little bit over regulated. But on the other hand, you might say, well, it's actually needed. But we already see it, like certain US-based companies, for example, are not releasing the latest models here in Europe right now because they are concerned about the implications with the AI Act or GDPR and other kind of policies that we have here in Europe. But long story short, I think that is a big, big problem, is the whole alignment of this technology with human values.
Absolutely, and I think although you're absolutely right, I think there's many groups within the industry trying to come up with to self-regulate and to do the right thing. That said, A lot of this is open source, and there's groups that will just say, okay, fine, the tech titans are doing their best to do this the right way, but we don't necessarily have to. And it's not something that's going to be easy to contain. And again, I'm excited that we're going to have some new tools to help with the difficult problems, and not just mental health issues, but issues such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's
Mm.
and other issues that we really have to deal with an aging population. We're all going to live so much longer than our parents and previous generations, but we need to get on top of some of these very challenging problems, which have the potential impact to be more destructive than what we're going to see from climate change and conflict. I think the issues of a top heavy aging population without enough informal caregivers, unless we can get on top of mental health, issues involving neurodegenerative disease, etc., we're going to have a very expensive problem that we won't have the tools to solve. So I am excited. I know we need to push forward. I'm not sure how to handle the regulation issue because I don't think our governments are particularly fast moving or very precise about the best way to do it. It's hard to do that. Yet things are moving forward so fast. So it's um, it's going to be interesting. I think I'm optimistic that we will do the right thing here, but I do think we need to work together to figure all that out.
That's a fantastic closing word, actually, because I fully agree with what you said. Right, we still need to move forward in order to solve these issues that we're facing, and this technology combining effective computing, advanced interfaces, VR, AR, humanoid robotics, and all of that coming together. Like you're saying, it's definitely needed because there's scalability issues with an aging populations, obviously. And so, yeah, that's great. But anyhow, you had fantastic closing word, and we're already at the end of the show. I don't want to keep you too long for today, but thank you so much, Walter, for joining us and sharing your insights and the fantastic work you're doing. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Well, and thanks everyone for joining us for Digital Dialogues, your compact conversations on the future of tech. As you know, watch our blog, follow our social media, and subscribe to our Reply podcast channel on your favorite podcast platform. You find us on all the podcast platforms out there. And of course, you can always check our website, reply.com, for watching or listening to previous episodes and also find other podcasts there. Again, thanks so much, folks. Take care and see you soon. Bye bye.